MacIntyre, investigative journalist best known for his fearless work confronting dangerous criminal organisations, is on a mission to uncover the modern face of international crime. Travelling with him to some of the world's best-known cities, we'll meet members of the criminal underworld, police and local residents to discover what life is really like in the world's toughest times. We've come to a place that is home to one of the richest and most dangerous criminal organisations in the world.
For me, it's terrifying, and I'm clinging on inches to my life.
A city that is nearly 3,000 years old.
There are people trying to stare me down.
We're in Naples, Italy, to uncover the dark side of a beautiful city that is steeped in culture and history. Surrounded by the stunning scenery of Pompeii and Vesuvius, visitors flock to Naples in search of peace and relaxation. Drawn by an historical romanticism that everyone knows and loves. Home to 3 former popes and the birthplace of pizza, Naples has a rich and vibrant past that has seen its city streets granted World Heritage Site status. On these same streets, a war is raging. A criminal organisation called the Camorra has grown into a rival for the state, developing a vice-like grip over the city with business interests totalling €30 billion a year. It is estimated that there are over 7,000 active Camorra members in Naples, who operate in about 100 separate clans, 5 times as many as the Sicilian mafia, known as the Cosa Nostra. They have been responsible for nearly 4,000 murders in the past 30 years. Now Italy, a member of the G8 and one of Western Europe's richest countries, has been forced to send in the troops to regain control of its streets. Donald's here to find out why Naples has become the murder capital of Europe, and to explore the influence of the Camorra in every corner of this city.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is a modern European country. And here you have this lawlessness here. You know, look at it. Honestly, scenes like this, as pervasive this, you'd hardly recognize it if it was even in Calcutta or India. And here you are in one of the wealthiest kind of first world economies in the world. And look at it. The place is run by gangsters. And the state and the police and the force of law and order are really struggling. I think we're supposed to go down there. I mean, this is a public road actually blocked by rubbish. Look at that.
The Camorra have been in charge of waste management for 20 years. And now, with the dumps full, garbage is spilling out onto the streets. Downall wants to find out more about the main players of the Camorra and to see if there's a chance to meet with them. So he's arranged to visit the Squadron Mobile, the police squad that investigates organised crime here. The man responsible for bringing the Camorra to justice is Vittorio Pisani.
Who are your number 1 targets in the Camorra?
I camorristi più ricercati sono i 2 fratelli Russo, Russo Pasquale e Russo Salvatore. Questo è Scotti Pasquale, lui è latitante dall'84. Questo è Zaccaria Michele, anche questa è una foto dei primi anni 90. Questi sono i latitanti, diciamo, più importanti. Ho visto che hanno inserito nell'elenco dei 30 latitanti più pericolosi un altro latitante casalese, quello che avevo detto prima, Iovine Antonio. È colui che, diciamo, in questo momento è un esponente principale del clan dei casalesi. Questo è di Lauro Marco.
Vittorio tells Donald that his chances of meeting a camorrista who will talk to him are slim. He has invited Donald to accompany his elite high-speed motorbike unit on a raid that evening. As Donald leaves police headquarters, he passes more soldiers on the street. Clearly, he's in more than just a tough town here. He's looking to expose a criminal organisation that is far deadlier than any street gang. But if he's going to find out how the Camorra has become a way of life in the city, he's going to have to delve deeper into the Neapolitan underworld. Donald MacIntyre is in Naples, Italy, to find out why a civil war is raging on the streets of this beautiful city. Here they have a phrase: see Naples and die. The phrase was coined 200 years ago to describe Naples' beauty, but now it alludes to the deadly power of the region's greatest menace, the city's criminal mafia, the Camorra. Donald's on his way to police headquarters to meet up with the members of the elite flying squad who are planning a raid on a known drug and gun dealer. The team are gathered in the briefing room. Donald knows that the flying squad are an elite unit, but reckons that these faces wouldn't look out of place on a wanted poster. The flying squad need to move quickly, and on the busy streets of Naples, that means cars are ditched in favour of high-powered motorbikes.
Perché la situazione logistica di Napoli necessita del fatto della presenza delle motociclette, che comunque con le macchine non si riesce, soprattutto nel centro, a svolgere un adeguato controllo del territorio, sia per il traffico, sia per i veicoli stretti, sia per il tipo di criminalità che c'è, che comunque utilizza prevalentemente mezzi di locomozione su due ruote.
None of the officers wear crash helmets, and some have been injured.
Appartengono a un clan camorristico della zona e durante un inseguimento in una curva in un vicoletto stretto siamo caduti e io con la mano e la strada era bagnata. Sicuramente qualche persona, i secchi d'acqua per evitare il fermo di queste due persone.
Italy has one of the worst road safety records in Europe, and motorbikes are involved in over half of them. So Donald asks if he can have a crash helmet. But he's told that for his own safety, it would be better not to wear one.
They say they don't want us to wear helmets because the Camorra wear helmets when they're on hits, and police officers don't. So when we're in their company on their bikes, neither will we.
When 12 high-powered motorbikes scream out of police HQ, it attracts a lot of attention. They need to get to their destination quickly before the target is tipped off. Consequently, the few road rules there are in Naples are ignored. Donald hangs on for dear life as they race through back streets and narrow alleyways to get to the suspect's house. With daredevil determination, the squad are flying through red lights, up one-way streets, and even onto the pavement.
I don't want to die!
After a hair-raising journey, the bikes arrive in San Giovanni, part of the notorious Secondigliano quarter. 7 kilometres out of the centre, This area is a thriving drug district where clans sell everything from cocaine to cannabis. The police warned Donald to refrain from talking in front of the camarista, as this would identify him as a foreign journalist and might make him a target.
The guys are waiting, trying to gain entrance into a house where a major Camorra family lives. They're having problems, they're hanging out. This is a very strong neighbourhood.
This house is in the middle of one of Naples' poorest neighbourhoods. And yet, there is gold-plated china in the cabinets, and the walls are adorned with pictures of the suspected camarista and his family. Tellingly, the door is made of 3-inch thick steel, and there's even an escape hatch to the roof. But the suspect is not worried. Despite having 20 police officers searching his house, he's super cool, and more concerned about providing hospitality.
Faccio qualche caffè. Ne fanno poco, giù una macchinetta. Io sono la casa. Ma che c'è soldi sta? Aspetta un po'. Ma che c'è soldi? Ti trovo. Sono fatto pure io.
Despite a vigorous search, the squad can't find anything and are forced to leave empty-handed. This is a perfect example of how difficult it is for the police to fight the war against the Camorra. They find a wealthy man living in a poor suburb with no obvious explanation as to how he got all his money. But they are unable to find incriminating evidence proving criminal activity, and so are forced to leave. For police units fighting against the Camorra in Naples, their powers are curbed by the law, whereas the Camorra are bound only by their ruthless imagination.
I think it's fair to say they are an elite motorbike force, a squad the like of which I've never seen or encountered before, having been around the world, to see the bravery, the courage and the daring do without health and safety, because these guys are living and breathing a battle against a very dangerous and difficult force. And you know what? That has to breathe a little sense of kamikaze policing about it. And you know, this is what they do. And I'm just glad my shift is nearly over.
The Italian Justice Department has already warned Donald that he has arrived in Naples at a dangerous time. Recently, a number of journalists have been targeted and placed under police protection because of their work uncovering crime in the city.
It's Donald MacIntyre from London.
Donald has arranged to meet a Neapolitan journalist to find out how real the threat in Naples is.
A pleasure.
Rosaria Capaccioni has been a reporter in Naples for 20 years. But after serious threats to her life, the police have assigned 2 bodyguards to protect her. Only 4 weeks before Donald's arrival, her house was burgled despite 24-hour police protection. Jewels and cash were left untouched. Only an award for her journalism was taken. This was a message to Rosaria to keep quiet.
When foreign journalists come in and ask the same questions, do they face the same threats?
Se tu scrivi dell'omicidio, dei fatti di sangue più evidenti, non si arrabbiano. Quando scrivi dei loro affari, quando scrivi delle cose che magari non sono state ancora scoperte dalla polizia o dalla magistratura, oppure...
Donald wants to know which areas are considered the most dangerous in Naples.
C'è la zona di Scampia, di Secondigliano, tutte quelle parti là che sono pesantemente compromesse, intere famiglie fanno parte della Camorra. Provincia di Caserta è un'altra cosa, cioè è come la Sicilia, qui è come la Sicilia. Quindi personalmente io consiglio sempre di andare accompagnati dalla polizia.
Casal di Principe is a suburb of Naples and only a 20-kilometre drive from the port. Vittorio, his contact at the mobile squad, tells Donal this is where some of Italy's most wanted criminals come from. Donal has discovered that of the 20,000 residents, 3,000 were under police surveillance and 2,000 have already been arrested. The government considers Casal di Principe such a major threat, it has sent in 500 troops to patrol the streets.
For a European country to surrender the civil streets to their national army, that is something extraordinary and exceptional, but it does tell a story of the threat that the Camorra pose.
Donal is determined to find out more about this neighbourhood. But it's so dangerous that the police insist he can only go in with an escort. On the edge of town, he meets up with Silvana Giusti from the DIA, the anti-mafia police.
Thank you very much for having
She
us.
tells him the DIA are planning an operation targeting a known Camorra boss and that he can come along.
Let's go.
Okay, let's go.
As Donal enters the town, he can see a lot of villas are being built and expensive cars on the streets. But the unemployment figures for Casal di Principe are close to 90%. So where has all this money come from?
And up ahead, there are some troops. There's some army on the streets there.
Donal is heading to the town hall with Silvana and the DIA. They need to gain final permission to conduct their operation.
Noi stiamo qui davanti al municipio di Casal di Principe perché questa mattina dobbiamo andare a formalizzare dei provvedimenti di sequestro di numerose abitazioni e terreni. Tant'è che abbiamo avuto esempi di case affittate a militari della NATO di Gricignano d'Aversa.
This embarrassing story had made news just before Donal arrived in Naples. Camorra kingpin Antonio Iovine, wanted for murder and one of Italy's top 30 fugitives, was found to have been renting out a property to a NATO officer. Once the permits are granted, Silvana and the DIA can serve the warrant against the NATO house.
Here, you know, within minutes of us arriving, there are people trying to stare me down from a very expensive Mercedes car, looking very wealthy, and then they pull the head away when the camera is faced with. So there's a definite attempt at intimidating us as a film crew and for me as a journalist.
Donal approaches the people living in the house to find out if they know their landlord is from the Camorra.
Good morning. Good morning.
I understand you've been supporting the Camorra by accident. Is that all right if you have a chat?
Yes.
Your story's been well reported that you accidentally, like a number of other NATO employees, found yourself renting from the Camorra.
Yeah, it was by pure accident. We have a great arrangement here. We live in a lovely home, and the landlord is a great individual. And out of the blue, we find Minister of Finance show up in our house one day and give us the bad news that the house was sequestered for anti-mafia reasons, which was a total shock. Now, granted, we knew that that Casal di Principe had a reputation of supporting the Camorra, but we never knew it was going to hit home.
As they leave, they receive more intelligence about NATO inadvertently funding the Camorra.
So it seems from our police sources who've just been in contact with the NATO top brass, it seems this case of renting from the Camorra is not just a one-off. The NATO top brass, we believe, according to police sources, think that up to 2,000 of their properties are rented from the Camorra at anything from 2,500 to 3,500 euros a month. And it means that up to 50 million euros every year is fueling the coffers of the Camorra. That's extraordinary.
We're with Donal MacIntyre in Naples, the murder capital of Europe, and home to one of the richest criminal organisations in the world. It's here that the Camorra's activities have resulted in over 4,000 murders, turning the streets of Naples into a bloodbath.
C'è stato un episodio proprio non lontano da questa zona, fu quindi attaccata da questo comando e ne fu fatta quindi anche un'esecuzione.
The Camorra's control over the city has led them to become a rival for the state, part of the organised crime business in Italy, which turns over £1 trillion every year.
More rubbish.
The Camorra are responsible for the rubbish on the streets. Like the fictional Sopranos, they are involved in waste disposal. But with the city dumps full, the Camorra are allowing rubbish to spill out onto the streets. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. For the past 20 years, the Camorra have secretly brought down toxic waste from Italy's industrial north and dumped it in and around the city of Naples. Now, the poison buried beneath this lush agricultural farmland is seeping to the surface, affecting the region's biggest export, buffalo mozzarella.
Per quanto riguarda le bufale, delle alimentazioni, delle derrate alimentari che però vengono coltivate nei nostri suoli, nei nostri terreni, tipo l'erba medica, la quantità di diossina tale che poi si è ritrovata nel latte. Diciamo, mangiare oggi prodotti locali, avendo questa consapevolezza, diciamo, fa un certo incute timore, io ho paura di mangiare, infatti perché comunque so quello che avviene intorno.
But the dumping of toxic waste doesn't just affect the livestock. Amongst the residents that live near the toxic dumps, cancer rates have soared by 30%.
Tutti quanti siamo, diciamo, contaminati. Abbiamo un tale livello di inquinamento che è paragonabile a quello della radioattività, diciamo, di Chernobyl. Noi siamo abituati a vedere Napoli come una cartolina, Napoli è bellissima, è stata ridotta, la nostra regione l'hanno distrutta veramente.
Nobody knows how much has been dumped over the years. Nobody knows what actually has been dumped or where it's been dumped. And the other real problem is no one's too keen to find out those answers because it's only going to be bad news. One, you're going to have to clear it up. Two, it's going to damage everything from tourism all the way to farm exports. It's just a disaster. And of course, to deal with it, you're going to have to take on the Camorra. Look, the Garden of Italy, what a disgrace. What a disgrace.
But the Camorra aren't just about toxic mud and radioactive sludge. Their business tentacles also stretch to the glamorous world of fashion. Many Neapolitan textile factories are controlled by the Camorra, and they use them to make fake high-end Italian fashion icons. These fake products are distributed around the world, but you can also buy them on the streets of Naples.
€20. And how much would it normally cost?
Wherever you shop in Naples, there's a chance you will be subsidising the Camorra. One of their biggest earners is mafia tax or pizzo, a monetary gift demanded from shopkeepers in return for protection. Silvana Fucito runs a hardware store, and like 80% of the other shop owners in the city, she has been menaced by the Camorra for the pizzo tax. When she refused to pay, the Camorra turned up on her doorstep.
Mettevano la pistola sul tavolo, sul banco e dicevano o paghi o ti facciamo saltare, ti spariamo. Proprio perché sapevamo di avere il negozio sotto un palazzo di 7 piani. Non pensavamo che potessero arrivare a tanto e mettere in discussione la vita di centinaia di persone.
Then one winter's evening, the Camorra poured petrol through the letterbox of the shop and burnt it down.
Perché veramente posso dire che dopo 24 ore la nostra vita è completamente cambiata, ma non solo la vita nostra personale, che può essere relativa, è cambiata Napoli, è successo veramente una sorta di miracolo che ha dato la possibilità un po' a tutti i napoletani di risvegliarsi e di portare all'attenzione nazionale.
Silvana has become the figurehead for the fight against Piso, an extortion racket that earns Italian mafias over 33 billion euros a year. But because of her stance, Silvana is now forced to travel with 2 armed police guards wherever she goes. Proving that if you stand up against the Camorra in Naples, you will need police protection.
Napoli è una città tormentata, una città dove niente funziona. Allora è una città completamente allo sbando.
The Camorra has interests in legitimate Neapolitan business. But Dono has discovered that they are also involved in the drugs trade, a business that earns them nearly €500,000 every day. To find out more, Donal is heading to Scampia, the biggest open-air drugs market in Europe.
Now we're coming into Scampia, which is a stronghold of the Camorra, and it's pretty dank and dark and desolate. But we've been told that by the police not to come in here by ourselves, so we've had to talk to our sources to let those who run this area, the capos, the family bosses, know that we're in here doing a documentary. And here on the entrance to Scampia, we have a police and an army roadblock. Now that is extraordinary. The civil street, I've seen this in Northern Ireland, you see it in Africa, but you don't see it in any other place in Europe. Extraordinary that the police come in here with an army escort.
Scampia is completely controlled by Camorra clans. Before Donal can enter, our sources have to negotiate with the capos in charge who grant permission for Donal to film in the infamous La Vela estate. There are conditions for filming which include not identifying any Camorra and no police escort for Donal. The Camorra have lookouts on the entrances and main roads of the estate. They signal to the bosses if an unknown car is seen driving in. Donal's car attracts their attention and is forced to stop.
Cut filming, yeah? Cut film. Stop. One more.
The Sentinels approach the car. Our team try to negotiate with them, but it's too late. The car is surrounded.
And now we're surrounded by drug dealers and drug addicts and...
One of them makes a call to the capo of the area, but then suddenly, things turn ugly. The camera is seized and Donal is told to get out of the car.
Okay.
Thankfully, our contact is able to negotiate with the Sentinels to let him go.
So we've had a bit of an incident. One of the sentinels in the Scampia Lavellas called us over, stopped us from filming, took our camera, took the tape, threatened to take the camera away for good. It was very, very aggressive. I don't think we were in danger, but certainly our equipment was. We'd already hidden all the recorded tapes in the car and replaced the tape in the camera with a blank tape. So, you know, the worst was going to happen. We were going to lose an expensive camera and a tape, but as it happened, we talked a way out of it, and now we're considering going back. We'll see if we can get in without being abused or harassed.
After further negotiation, Donal is finally allowed into the estate. This is one of the toughest and most lawless housing estates in Europe. With 50% of the population unemployed, the Camorra thrives here. Dealers earn up to €200 million every year from drug sales in this area. And it's the place where drug addicts from across Naples and Italy come to buy the cheapest high-grade heroin and crack cocaine in the EU.
Now even just a random place, you see the needles everywhere, right? A square meter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I mean, there's about 12 needles.
As Donal is filming on the stairs of La Vela, he is joined by 2 sentinels who are under orders to watch him. They don't want to be identified. These 2 young low-level camarista are at the bottom of the ladder, but clearly they're already earning enough to dress well, and they're probably armed. They tell Donal that they are there to keep an eye on what is being filmed and to make sure he doesn't go anywhere he shouldn't. Effectively, they are his Camorra escort in the slums of La Vela.
Tu ti sai comportare con loro, con noi, pure noi ci comportiamo con loro. Però si fa una stronzata o qualcosa di questo, che i morti fanno a noi, queste cose qua.
Just below these flats are the drug-dealing piazzas where every day thousands of addicts come to buy heroin and crack cocaine. The Camorra won't allow us to film there, but we secured this archive of what lay below.
Casa ci fa una vita solo per loro, aspettate, se vengono a pigliare roba e se no.
A volte ci sono anche siringhe in mezzo alle scale. Per i bambini, erano Benevento, Battipaglia, Roma.
Viene a Milano, però non bello che se no.
Il padre.
Il fratello.
Whilst in the estate, Donal meets a former addict and resident who explains what life is like in La Vela.
Le morgono sotto i porticali. Vanno a comprare la roba, si mettono sotto i porticali e si drogano. Dalla mattina alla sera le fanno queste cose qua. Ma mi sembra tranquilla, vedi? È un po' tranquilla, ma non è così. Non li vedi, però fischio. Vieni, ci vieni. Mammina, sta in coppa, La piglia un'amica mia. Va, sì, va, non ti preoccupare. Va, Gianni, vai. Va piano piano, questa. Non ti preoccupare, zio.
La Vela is a hellhole. A haven for drug addicts. And still, families were living there. It's a relief to get out. As he's leaving, Donal gets a call from a contact. It's a major breakthrough in his quest to talk to a Camorra member.
As we're discovering, the omerta, that code of silence, really is very much alive on these streets. No one wants the secrets of the Camorra to pass by their lips. No one wants to be accused of betraying the secrets of the Camorra. So it's very difficult to get anyone to talk openly about their work and how they operate. Now, we have managed to track down 2 ex-Camoristas, 2 ex-members of the Camorra, who are going to talk to us about what they've done and the work they do. And it'll be fascinating to see just how far they let us into that inner circle, the inner world of this very mysterious mafiosi organisation.
This is an amazing opportunity for Donal to speak firsthand to those who have been directly involved in Camorra violence and criminal activity. Donal's on his way back towards the city, where the ex-Camoristas have agreed to speak to him.
What is the life of a Camorrista like?
Perché quando facevo il camorrista nella propria vita io non pensavo a niente, perché ogni momento della mia vita pensavo che fosse l'ultimo, quindi era tragica come cosa, era triste, non ti aiutava a pensare di avere un futuro. Un camorrista non pensa di avere un futuro, vive nel presente. E mi piaceva assai, tantissimo, mi piaceva comprarmi i vestiti di Armani, di Valentino, tenere la sacca piena di soldi, camminare con i miei amici e tutti quanti mi dovevano guardare e abbassare la testa. Ero reverenziato dagli altri, dalla gente del quartiere.
Well, what was it like for both of you? What was it like when there was infighting within the
E ci ammazzavamo attorno a loro così, come se niente fosse una cosa normale.
Si vive in una maniera molto spaventosa, insicuri e paurosi di camminare, perché comunque poi è una sorta di non più vivibilità, non si vive più quando ci sono queste faide.
Colpiti a morte in un tempo brevissimo, perché sennò proprio a livello proprio organizzativo, cioè non ci riesci. Una volta che hai incominciato una guerra tutti quanti prendono delle precauzioni e non riesci più a beccare le persone per ammazzarle, non le trovi più, mentre in quella guerra si trovava e si ammazzava tutti i giorni perché nessuno sapeva da che parte stare, perché a Napoli attualmente ci sono 40-50 guerre. Le guerre a Napoli non finiscono mai, si prendono delle pause, ma non finiscono.
There's so much to take in from a meeting with the Camaristas, but for me, one of the most crucial parts is that this city is really still at war. There is just a very uneasy peace declared, and it seems it could just take the smallest incident to trigger off another bloodbath. And that's not coming from me, the police, another journalist. It's coming from the Camaristas, the ex-Camaristas themselves, the soldiers who fought that bloody and terrible war.
The Camorra in Naples are the biggest criminal organisation in the world. They are responsible for more deaths than the IRA, ETA and Hamas put together. They pose such a threat to the state that the government has stationed troops on the streets in an attempt to wrestle back control. For over 200 years, the Camorra has terrorised the people of Naples. In that time, over 4,000 people have been killed. One of their most brutal hits was the murder of the priest Don Pepe Diana in 1994. Donald is returning to Casal di Principe with Silvana and the DIA to visit the Church of St. Nicholas of Bari, where Don Pepe was killed. The new padre has agreed to show him around.
L'altare da cui Don Peppino Diana dove Don Pepe ha celebrato, e poi invece il posto dove ha ucciso lo vedremo dall'altra parte.
Don Pepe Diana was a padre who stood up to the Camorra in its fiercest stronghold, Casal di Principe. He refused to bury the Camorra dead and regularly denounced the church's very own omerta towards the mafia in Italy. Then one morning, as he prepared for Mass, a Camorra hitman entered the church.
Ecco, Don Peppino praticamente aveva qui il suo ufficio e quindi praticamente usciva anche se questa stanza praticamente era divisa in due, quindi l'uscita diciamo che era questa qui, e lui venendo da questa parte si avviava per andare verso l'altare, e il killer, dopo che gli è stato detto chi era Don Peppino Diana, più o meno da queste parti lo ha ammazzato.
Don Pepe was murdered in his own church. 2 bullets to the head and 2 in the face. A textbook Camorristi hit, warning others not to speak out.
Allora la comunità, dopo questa prima fase, soprattutto nei momenti più importanti, si è espressa massicciamente, perché poi c'è stata la chiesa del luogo, si è stretta intorno alla figura di Don Peppino Diana e ne ha fatto da allora un momento di anche un'immagine importante della lotta per la legalità.
The future for this town, this little city, is it still with the Camorra or the church?
Allora, il futuro di questo paese deve essere necessariamente con il bene e la legalità e la Chiesa che cerca di parlarne continuamente. Il futuro sarà con la Camorra per chi vuole continuare ad esserci, ma è soltanto per quelli che cerchiamo, speriamo che siano sempre più pochi.
Outside the church, Donald's speaking to Silvana about this brutal murder.
And tell us about the investigation into the murder of the priest.
Sì, le investigazioni nella morte di Peppe Diana hanno permesso dopo un anno, nel 1995, di arrestare proprio Quadrano Giuseppe, che è stato il mandante dell'omicidio del prete. Noi lo arrestammo, in particolare io andai a Valencia insieme a personale della squadra mobile di Caserta, lo arrestammo e lui immediatamente diventò collaboratore di giustizia.
Donald also wants to find out what the future holds for Naples.
An army on the civil streets of any European country is an extraordinary thing. It shows you what a big battle you have to fight.
Yes, è un extraordinary thing, è una cosa straordinaria, lo so, anche in Europa è straordinaria. Tra la camorra e lo Stato sì, c'è una guerra sempre tra la camorra e lo Stato, perché la camorra è l'antistato per eccellenza.
During his time in Naples, Donald has seen the frightening and far-reaching power of the Camorra. He's learned how it has evolved from a gang into a powerful criminal industry, taking advantage of the poor people of the city. The presence of government troops indicates their lack of control in the city. Unable to compete with the money, prestige and glamour of the Camorra, it seems that this is a battle they are losing. Many Neapolitans show the Camorra greater support than the government, and only when that loyalty reverts will the Italian state win the war and return the city of Naples to peace. Donald MacIntyre, investigative journalist best known for his fearless work confronting dangerous criminal organisations, is on a mission to uncover the modern face of international crime. Travelling with him to some of the world's best known cities, we'll meet members of the criminal underworld, police and local residents to discover what life is really like in the world's toughest times. Donald's in a city on the edge.
Do you guys carry guns?
Somewhere where conflict can erupt without warning. A place where violent crime is nearly 3 times the national average.
It seems very heavy-handed.
And where anyone can get caught in the mayhem.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Donald's in Paris to find out why it's one of the world's toughest towns. This is Paris, one of the world's most loved cities, home to the Eiffel Tower and 11 million people. The French capital is a popular place for visitors who are lured by its culture, cuisine and romance. But there's something you won't find in the visitors' guides. Beneath the affable chic, Paris is riven with civil unrest. In the last few years, this city has been dogged by riots. 2 warring factions struggle to prevail. On one side, second-generation immigrants who feel they're the victims of discrimination. And in the other, the forces of law and order, led by President Nicolas Sarkozy.
Ça ne peut pas rester impuni.
Civil unrest has exploded here twice in the past 4 years. In 2005, 10,000 cars were set alight, and in 2007, 30 police officers were injured on the streets. Donald's come to Paris to find out why riots are tearing it apart. He'll see the conflict from both sides.
Et en fait, ça devient une espèce de jeu de dominance dans la rue.
On passe de revendication à un effet plus sporadique.
And he'll meet someone who many believe is hell-bent on turning the riots into an all-out race war.
Vous battez contre un système prédateur,
un système raciste.
Donald's at the Gare du Nord train station in the heart of the city. The rich and poor are geographically separated in Paris. Inner city Paris is middle class and affluent, whereas the less visible suburbs on the outskirts of the city are poor, deprived neighbourhoods housing some 8 million less fortunate Parisians. The Gare du Nord station is where these worlds collide, and in 2007 it was the scene of intense rioting. Donald arranged to go out on patrol with the police around the Gare du Nord, many of whom were involved in the conflict in 2007.
What is your plan today? What is your route and plan?
Donc on va patrouiller dans la gare du Nord. Vous verrez, c'est très grand, c'est un complexe qui est très grand. Donc déjà on va patrouiller dans la gare et si on a l'occasion, effectuer des contrôles.
The Gare du Nord is Europe's largest train station. Security is taken seriously here. There are 100 armed police officers, 600 surveillance cameras, and army reinforcements are on permanent alert. It's a lot to take in.
No idea what's happening, but I've never seen so many police officers, but it seems very heavy-handed.
The police are carrying out some random checks. Under French law, ID papers must always be carried and can be checked at any time.
Parfait. Donc beaucoup de policiers parce que la foule, l'interpellation s'est mal passée et la foule s'est regroupée autour des effectifs de police qui étaient en civil. Donc des renforts ont été déployés.
It was an approach like this that started the riots in 2007. Passengers coming from the suburbs felt they were unfairly targeted by police. Back then, terrified visitors and rush hour passengers were caught in the mayhem as rioters went on a rampage of burning and looting throughout the station. The threat from some of the suburbs' more militant factions has made some areas of Paris feel like no-go areas.
You're still in Paris, it's a nice city, but you don't want to roam in bad quarters. Everything can happen, and usually I think that the people who are doing bad stuff in Paris are not from Paris themselves, they're coming from the suburbs.
Civil unrest has divided this city, and there's a feeling of fear and mistrust on both sides. In modern-day Paris, the motto liberty, equality and fraternity no longer applies. Paris, the cultural capital of Europe, but also a city in flux with a huge police presence. Some argue that aggressive policing of this town caused violent clashes in the heart of the city. Donald's seen for himself some of the questionable police tactics thought to have provoked the civil disturbance. And now he's heard about a sinister figure who is preaching hatred all over the city. Donald knows that if he's to get to the root of the problems in Paris, he must find out more about the suburbs. Known as the banlieue, Paris' suburbs are renowned throughout France as a hotbed for civil unrest. But they became infamous throughout the world in 2005 for riots which lasted for over 30 days. It was the first time France's social unrest was exposed to the world, and its impact on Paris has been profound.
In 2005, there's been these riots, which just scared many people in France. But it is not in Paris, in the center of Paris, it's in the suburbs.
Since then, the local Parisians are afraid to go near some of these areas.
In the transports, usually in the area, a lot of people, just general public, were attacked, assaulted for no reason.
When I have troubles also is when I take the train to go back home in my suburb at night. When I take the last train, all the people from the suburbs are taking the last train as well, and if they want to make a little bit of money, they can take it from you. Even myself, the way I'm dressed, I'm not like really rich or anything. I was afraid to lose my mobile. I felt completely like they could punch me in the face. It happened before to me.
Donald's meeting journalist Anthony Headley, who has been reporting on the escalating trouble in the Banlieue. Donald's hoping he can explain why people in these neighbourhoods are so angry.
They're not immigrants. They're the sons of the immigrants. They're more French than the French today, except their color of skin is not white, and therefore they're excluded.
Riots are not new to Paris. In 1968, over 800,000 students, teachers and workers marched through the French capital. They clashed with police and demanded the fall of the Charles de Gaulle government. The riots of '68 are seen as heroic and defined the decade. They changed France forever and helped create a more liberal society. But the riots of this decade have been largely ignored.
You either have a situation of riots, or you have a situation nobody speaks about the banlieue, because nobody wants to hear about it. It's like, it's over there, we never go there, we don't want to see these guys, let's not deal with this issue.
Ignoring the situation for so long has only made matters worse, as now the rioting is beginning to creep into the centre.
It's a new development that what's happening in the suburbs comes into the centre of Paris. A lot of people do feel afraid.
Donald's heard of an inner city area where this is already the case. He wants to see for himself how far the problems have spread here before he visits the suburbs. A contact has set up a meeting for him. Only 2 miles away from some of Paris's most famous landmarks, the 18th arrondissement is an economically deprived area beset by problems. It's a place where middle-class Parisians fear to go. Donald's meeting with 2 local criminals who don't want to be identified to try and find out more about crime in this area. Here, any stranger is seen as a legitimate target.
Une caméra. Ouais, c'est des petits qui vont lui voler, mais sinon ceux qui vendent, ils vont rien faire du tout. Par exemple, si tu passes à rue Mira en voiture, ils prennent ta voiture normal. Carjacking.
Carjacking? Yeah. It's common, normal?
Non, c'est pas vraiment commun, mais c'est normal.
Donald finds out that these 2 men are also drug dealers.
On vend du crack et du shit, mais le crack ça marche mieux. On fait plus d'argent avec le crack. Maximum 2000 € par jour. 2000 € par jour.
Do you carry knives?
Ouais, des fois. Mais quand on a une arme, c'est pour tuer quelqu'un. La plupart du temps, ceux qui ont des armes, c'est ceux qui ont des problèmes à cause de la drogue. Ils vendent dans un territoire ou un autre.
Il y a plein de gens qui doivent avoir des armes.
Ouais, tout le monde a des armes.
And how would you defend your territory if you come back and somebody's on your street corner?
La plupart du temps, ça se tire dessus.
Is this votre vie? C'est bon?
C'est la merde. C'est pourri, mais c'est comme ça. Hein. On s'y fait, on est habitué. Normal.
And if this is what the disaffected youth in the centre are feeling, it makes Donald wonder what the young people cut off from Parisian society out in the banlieue think about their situation. Donald will be heading off there tomorrow to find out. Donald spotted an article in the newspaper that's added to his concerns about going to the banlieue. It's a story about a Hollywood production starring John Travolta that paid a high price for using the suburbs as a gritty backdrop for their film.
Torched production vehicles, thousands and thousands of pounds worth of damage. The film is called From Paris with Love, but this is from the banlieue with love and the media. Welcome to town, we're going to burn out your production vehicles.
Tibet better understand the grievances of people in the banlieue, Donald's finally on his way to a housing project called Le Bosquet. It's 17 kilometres from the centre of Paris, and it's where the worst of the rioting took place in 2005. The riots started when 2 teenagers were electrocuted whilst being chased by police. The deaths caused outrage and sparked the most violent riots in a generation. The riots in Le Bosquet lasted for 20 days and then began to spread across the rest of France. The government took it so seriously that a state of emergency was declared. During that time, over 100 police officers were injured and nearly 3,000 people were arrested. It cost the French taxpayer over €200 million. Donald's been put in touch with someone called Zid, who we've been told is one of the neighbourhood heavies. Zid says he can guarantee Donald's safety whilst filming.
We're all, except for the crew, just a little apprehensive because this is a very dodgy and dangerous area, and particularly for strangers, and it's incredibly poor. We've been warned about our safety, but I'm about to meet a guy who assures me that he'll personally take us under his wing and look after us because he's connected.
The Bosquet doesn't look anything like the Paris Donald's been in so far. Fortunately, it's not too long before he's met by his contact Zip, who's going to be our guide.
On va passer comme ça?
Yeah, sure. Look, I can't imagine this is a France, a Paris that many people can imagine.
Il n'y a pas de tour Eiffel. La tour Eiffel en haut du bâtiment là, pendant la nuit on la voit, elle est tout au bout là-bas.
Oui.
C'est tout. Et c'est loin de tout ça.
Zid tells Donald that before we start filming, it's important to lay down some ground rules for the safety of the crew.
Il y a des endroits vraiment, faut pas filmer. Vous allez voir, de toute façon, les cris vont partir et puis baisse la caméra, tout ça, faudra pas filmer.
But before Zid can show Donald around, he gets a lesson in how the French authorities police these tough neighbourhoods.
On va couper la caméra comme je vous avais dit.
With their guns drawn, the police start to search Zid and his friends.
Ils cherchent la merde, ils provoquent, ils nous insultent, ils nous manquent de respect. Ils profitent de leur autorité. Moi, quand j'étais petit, hein, bien sûr, ils m'ont déjà mis des claques et tout, c'est clair. Ils m'ont déjà insulté de sales blagues, sales noirs. Et bien sûr, ils m'ont déjà traité et tout.
It's this kind of antagonism between the police and the residents of the banlieue that sparked the riots of 2005. This is video footage shot by Zid and his friends of them in action during the riot. Anarchy swept through Le Bosquet as images of Paris in flames were broadcast around the world.
Ici, là, cette rue, c'est la rue principale des émeutes. Les Syriens, ils étaient là-bas, en face, là, au bout de cette rue. Et nous, on était là, sur cette rue. C'est-à-dire, c'est pour ça, là, il y a même les pierres, ils sont là, les pierres. Les pierres, ils sont là, et c'est avec ça qu'on se défend.
Riots happen here on a regular basis, sometimes up to twice a week. But only the major ones like those of 2005 are widely reported.
À n'importe quel moment, ça peut partir. À n'importe quel moment, une petite course-poursuite, ça finit mal. Comme ça. Les gens veulent leur jeter des pierres. Vous savez, qu'on a déjà vécu.
The majority of residents in the poorer banlieues are Muslims of North African origin. Their mistrust of French society began during Algeria's War of Independence from France, in which the French were notorious for their use of torture and brutality.
And for the first time in the long and bloody fight with nationalist Arab forces, Frenchman has taken up arms against Frenchman.
Algeria finally won independence in 1962, but prejudice against Muslims in modern-day France is still evident. Zid says that the police are not welcome here and shows Donald some of the graffiti in the neighbourhood that spells out what he and everyone else from Le Bosquet really think about the authorities.
Ici, c'est la phrase magique, nique la police, c'est la phrase magique. Partout il y a marqué fuck police, nique la police. Pourquoi? Parce que ils nous aiment pas. C'est réciproque. Ah ouais. Un gros fuck police. Fuck CRS. CRS, c'est la police qui, quand il y a les émeutes.
Donald's been in the neighbourhood for a while and hasn't felt threatened. But suddenly, things become very tense.
Si toi va vers là-bas, on va filmer pas le grand là-bas là. Bide-le pas le grand. Ah, de dire bouge, c'est toi t'as ouf. C'est toi t'as ouf. Garde la pêche. Écoute, je t'ai dit, te filme pas, garde la pêche. Bah vas-y, arrête de me parler comme ça, cousin. Dis tranquillement, y a pas de problème. Je lui dis déjà, il y a des gens. Comment tu me parles? Bouge. T'es un bouge, en plus bouge. Tu crois que je suis un bouffon ou quoi? Tu me dis bouge, vas-y, casse-toi, je bouge pas, je reste là.
Viens pas avec lui.
Parle-moi bien, dis-moi le bien, y a pas de problème. Il y a des autres choses, pas vous faire filmer. Dis-moi pas bouge, mon frère. Tu me dis bouge, mon frère. T'es un peu toi, Dev. Reste tranquille, Dev, mon frère. Les poules, mon frère. Jamais je t'ai manqué de respect, mon frère. Tu m'as manqué de respect plusieurs fois en parlant. Jamais je t'ai manqué de respect. Reste tranquille, cousin. Ah ouais, hey. Laisse la caméra filmer, hein. Si je vous ai dit, ça c'est le truc de la vie, tous les jours. Tous les jours à des prises de tête parce que c'est la galère.
Zid leaves Donald in no doubt what would have happened to us as a TV crew if he hadn't been around.
Les gens sont prêts à t'embrouiller même. Je vous jure, vous serez tout seul là, les journalistes, vous serez venus tout seul. Hein? Je vous dis la vérité.
Then he takes him to a spot where unwelcome visitors are taken.
Vous voyez ici là. Il y a trop d'histoires qui sont réglées dans cette cave. Plusieurs caves comme ça, mais surtout cette cave. Parce que là, on vient de l'escalier, c'est dire quand il y a des histoires qui se passent mal, elles se règlent ici. Quand il y a des inconnus, ils se règlent ici. Je dis la vérité. Et voilà, combien d'histoires il y a eu. Combien d'histoires, je ne vais pas vous faire montrer, ça se trouve, il y a même une trace de sang là. Mais ça sert à rien.
Okay, we'll stay close to my side now.
Yeah.
Stay close. When the riots were on, people used the phrase civil war. Do you think there is one simmering underneath Paris at the moment?
C'est la rage qui est à l'intérieur des gens. Les gens, ils ont la rage. La police, ils sont arrivés jusqu'à mettre la rage dans le cœur des gens. Avec le contrôle répétitif, avec la pression qu'ils mettent. Hein? À chaque fois, il y aura un événement, on pourra se venger sur la police, les gens ils vont venir. C'est clair.
I can't believe that this is the Paris that I grew up with. Of course, it's an hour's drive from the city centre, which we all know so well. But this is it. For so many, this is their home, this is their city.
Donald's seen enough of Le Bosquet. Walking back to his car, he's reminded of how vulnerable he really is.
Oh, I'm gonna be really fucked off now. This came under protection.
Ah, Bosquet, hein.
This came under protection. Camera's gone.
On est resté trop longtemps là-bas. Là-bas, on est resté trop longtemps. Les chacals là.
But this came with your protection.
His expensive camera and laptop have been stolen.
It's dead. C'est mort.
Oh, for fuck's sake. We're just fucking stupid to do it. Stupid.
Donald wonders how Zid feels about having his authority undermined.
Vous serez sous ma protection là. Hein? Or des jeunes là, ils vous ont pas touché. Déjà là, ils sauront qu'à la moi cette voiture, ils l'ont jamais touché. Les gens qui ont fait ça, c'est pas moi. Ça, c'est Aziz, ils n'ont pas fait ça.
But this is your nation, this is your
Ma
territory.
protection, elle est là. Depuis tout à l'heure, vous êtes là, personne ne vous a touché. Désolé.
Ça.
Mais c'est les bosquets.
With little hope of ever seeing his camera again, it's time to head back to the centre of Paris. They play by their own rules in the banlieue. And even though Zid is one of the top boys, it's obvious that he can't control all the angry young men in his neighbourhood. Donald's in Paris to investigate why it's one of the world's toughest towns. He's already seen how poverty and hatred for the police is fueling civil unrest in the outer suburbs. And he's even become one of the city's crime statistics, having had his camera stolen in Le Bosquet.
This came under protection.
Les chacals là.
Zid had promised to protect Donald, but in the end he couldn't deliver. After Donald's experience, he's relieved to be heading back to the comfortable familiarity of the city centre. He thought he'd never see it again, but apparently his camera has been turned in.
I'm on the way to the police station, just up here, to retrieve the camera, which unexpectedly turned up after it was nicked from the car.
The police tell Donald they found his camera left by the road on the same spot it had been stolen. Whether the thieves had a change of heart or Zid pulled some strings, Donald will never know. But it shows that not everything in Le Bosquet is what it seems. Today, Zid and his friends are travelling into the streets of central Paris, where they say they still feel unwelcome. Here, their sense of alienation from French society feels even more pronounced.
Bon, voilà, à Paris, c'est un autre truc à Paris. Un autre monde. Un autre univers, c'est pas du tout la même.
Ils demandent de l'argent.
Exact, et puis voilà quoi. Il y a des endroits à Paris, ils sont interdits pour nous. À Champs-Élysées, Tour Eiffel, tous ces quartiers-là, c'est pas du tout pour nous. Par exemple, si on essaie d'aller sur les Champs-Élysées, pour se faire une soirée, on dit on va rentrer en boîte de nuit, c'est impossible. Ils vont jamais nous faire rentrer. Parce qu'ils croient qu'on est des délinquants, ils généralisent tout le monde. Ils croient que tous les mecs de banlieue, tous les jeunes des banlieues, c'est tous des délinquants.
The Champs-Élysées is the most expensive strip of real estate in Europe, and a place where the divisions between class and race in Paris are all too evident.
Ben voilà.
Les Champs-Élysées.
Les Champs-Élysées. L'avenue la plus belle du monde. Là, vraiment, Paris, on voit que c'est beau, c'est propre, c'est la belle vie. Mais la banlieue, c'est pas du tout la même. Ils vont aller au bosquet, ils vont voir la misère, ils vont voir la saleté. Ils ne vont pas s'arrêter. Ils ont l'habitude de venir là, de vivre dans le luxe. C'est la voiture de mes rêves, quoi. La voiture de mes rêves que je vais sûrement jamais avoir. C'est ça, Ghetto, représente. Ah, il y a la police, trop tard. Fin du spectacle. Ah, c'est fini. Rien à voir, j'ai rien dedans. Bah voilà, c'est la fin du show. Parce qu'ils ont vu aussi en même temps, c'est des jeunes blacks, tout ça, des jeunes de banlieue. C'est normal, ils stoppent.
Every action by the police, no matter how routine or harmless, can be interpreted by disillusioned young men like Zid as being racially motivated. Donald has heard one side of the story through Zid and his friends, but is curious to hear from the other side. Donald's feeling that policing parts of this city is a thankless, risky business. Donald's meeting with former riot cop Marc Boutin, who's worked on the front line. For the last 20 years, he has seen Paris become tougher and tougher.
Les jeunes, the young from the banlieue, say that the police are racist, they're oppressive, they're violent, and that's why this conflict. What's your view on that?
Il y a une politique de l'immigration qui est décidée par le gouvernement actuel et qui conduit les policiers à contrôler les gens systématiquement qui sont arabes, d'origine africaine ou juste de couleur de peau différente. Parce que là, c'est très intrusif pour les gens. Un policier ne peut pas dire « moi, j'ai pas envie de faire ça » parce que le policier, il fait exactement ce qu'on lui dit.
Is it true that parts of the banlieue appear to be a no-go zone, a no-go area for the police?
C'est le problème qu'il y a maintenant. Parce que les jeunes policiers viennent en priorité de province et se retrouvent lâchés en première affectation, souvent dans des quartiers sur lesquels il y a un énorme décalage entre eux, leur vie, leur expérience, et d'un seul coup, ils deviennent adultes dans un monde qui est beaucoup plus violent, beaucoup plus physique. Et en fait, tout le monde a peur. Et une des compensations de la peur, c'est justement de devenir soit violent, soit arrogant avec les gens, parce que c'est une manière de compenser.
If the rookie cops are going in there scared, terrified of the dangers, inevitably the people in the banlieue decide, okay, they'll react. So by being aggressive and nervous, you create your own reaction.
Et en fait, ça devient une espèce de jeu de dominance. Dans la rue, la loi, c'est celle du plus fort. Et ça, les gamins des banlieues qui sont des voyous le savent pertinemment.
It's becoming clear why Paris has become such a tough town. The police in the disaffected communities from the banlieue are trapped in perpetual and seemingly unresolvable conflict. Neither side can be seen to back down and risk showing signs of weakness. It's a turbulent situation and one which is easy to exploit. Donald's heard of people who are using it to achieve their own questionable aims. Kemi Seba is a charismatic leader of a black militant group. He preaches racial solidarity amongst black and Muslim people in France, as well as violent opposition towards Israel and Zionism.
Dire que vous vous battez contre un système prédateur, un système raciste, et oblitérer la thématique de l'occupant et du système sioniste.
He's recently served time in prison for his role in a violent attack on a Jewish neighbourhood. This footage shows Kemi and his supporters burning an Israeli flag. Kemi's ideas have caused outrage in France, and he is now facing more time behind bars on fresh charges of inciting racial hatred. If found guilty, he could face another 6 months in prison. The latest charges of anti-Semitism have been brought by the Union of Jewish French Students.
Kemi Seba présente une menace d'abord par rapport à ce qu'il fait. Il insuffle, notamment sur Internet, par un travail dans les quartiers. Il cultive une haine, et notamment à la haine des Juifs.
The worry amongst Parisians is that Kemi's extreme ideas are inciting conflict on the streets of Paris. His preachings have already been linked to hate crime in the capital. In January 2006, a young Jewish man named Ilan Halimi was kidnapped in central Paris and driven out to the suburbs. He was imprisoned in a flat in the banlieue where he was starved and tortured. Halimi was found tied and handcuffed to a tree 3 weeks later. His body was covered with stab wounds and burns from acid and other flammable liquids. He died on his way to hospital. Residents of the estate had heard his screams and the laughter of those torturing him.
C'est un crime crapuleux et aussi antisémite. Je me dis qu'il n'a pas pu endurer pendant 3 semaines toutes ces horreurs. C'est pas possible. Ce ne sont pas des êtres humains, ce sont des monstres.
Eventually, 15 youths from the banlieue were arrested. They were members of a loose gang of desperados who share a hatred of Jewish people.
Je crois n'en pas douter que Kémy Séba a une influence par rapport à l'enlèvement et à la torture et l'assassinat d'Ilan Halimi, puisque le discours qu'il véhicule, un discours de haine, a été ensuite, dans une certaine mesure, repris par les auteurs.
Ilan Halimi's murder is just one of many racially motivated attacks within the French capital. Kémy Séba's influence does seem to be growing, and his followers are bringing new problems into the centre of Paris. After numerous phone calls and conversations with his lawyer, Kémy has agreed to meet with Donald. He rarely gives interviews, but has agreed to talk to Donald on the basis that Donald belongs to the foreign media. He believes the local media are biased against him and his cause.
I'm a bit nervous. I'm about to meet Kémy Séba. Now, he hates whites and he hates journalists only a little bit more than he hates whites. He's about to face trial and sentencing probably tomorrow for incitement to violence and anti-Semitic behaviour. I'm going to meet him. I'm delighted he's going to meet me, and I have no idea what's going to happen. There he is. Pleasure. Thanks very much.
Kémy Séba is rarely seen in public without a large gang of henchmen.
Irish? Irish, yeah. Yeah.
He tells Donald that it all started for him after a trip to America.
J'ai été 3 semaines aux États-Unis lorsque j'étais plus jeune, et durant cette période, during this time, I met the Nation of Islam.
Now, brothers, there's a social benefit.
The Nation of Islam is an American power group that preaches a message of black supremacy. The organisation has had famous members such as Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X.
It was a beginning for me in my work. Because for me, my fight is my work, is my destiny, is my life.
Since Kémy's message appeals to the angry youths from the banlieue, Donald wonders what his views are on the riots.
Les jeunes commencent à se prendre en charge. Les jeunes noirs, les jeunes arabes et d'autres minorités commencent à se prendre en charge. Commencent à comprendre que la police n'est pas là pour les protéger, contrairement à ce qu'on a voulu nous faire croire pendant un certain temps, mais beaucoup de policiers sont là pour leur causer des problèmes.
Kémy explains that the people in his movement are the same kinds of people as those that took part in the riots. They are poor and angry young people from the suburbs.
Is it essential for change to have it accompanied by violence?
La paix si possible, la violence quand c'est nécessaire. La violence est nécessaire quand on vous la pose pendant des siècles et des siècles. Dans une démarche, non pas de débattre avec l'ennemi, mais dans une démarche d'abattre l'ennemi. De l'abattre sur le terrain de la vérité en le disqualifiant.
Donald's encounter with Kémy Séba is discomforting. His words have power over the city's disaffected youth, and he may well have manipulated those who clashed with the authorities. More than this, his message may have influenced one of the most brutal, racially motivated murders in recent history. His influence in Paris is frightening. Donald's in Paris, a city at odds with itself. He's met a radical leader who's trying to marshal young rioters into a deadly force. And he's been to the notorious suburbs of Paris, where he's had his car broken into and his video camera stolen.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Camera's gone.
Donald's found that other riots in French history were a force of change, but that the riots of the 21st century have changed nothing. Residents in the suburbs have burned down their own communities, but all that they've achieved is increased notoriety for the neighbourhood and a spot on the evening news. Before Donald leaves Paris, he's visiting Grigny, 22 kilometres south of the city centre. He's meeting one of the locals who's trying to foster a more positive attitude amongst the disaffected youth. Grigny feels like a ghost town, eerie and deserted. Here's the same neighbourhood in the middle of a full-scale riot. Donald's meeting a man called Kuda, who who was once at the forefront of the riots, but he's had a change of heart and now feels that riots are getting his people nowhere.
Ça, c'est les émeutes, on va dire plus les affrontements se sont dégradés. On passe de revendications à un effet plus sporadique. Ce qui se passe, c'est que les plus petits, ça leur a donné envie de voir parce que c'était excitant de voir des choses réelles. On va dire, c'est vrai qu'à la télé, on peut voir des explosions, des arrestations, mais le fait de le voir, c'est vrai que c'est excitant.
Could have told Donald that some young people involved in riots here had lost sight of what they were fighting for, or caught up in a frenzy of mindless violence.
In all this rioting, who actually wins? Did les gens from Grigny, did they win? Did they have a victory?
Non, ils ne gagnent pas, à Grigny, les gens ne gagnent jamais. Pourquoi? Parce que ça peut être des jeunes ou d'autres personnes, lorsqu'ils se mobilisent pour affronter les policiers, ils cassent tout autour d'eux. En voulant affronter les policiers. Donc ce qui se passe, c'est que les personnes qui habitent ici, c'est eux qui payent les réparations.
Donald's time in Paris is coming to an end, but he's eager to hear the result of Kemi Seba's court case. Donald met Kemi just before he was charged with inciting racial hatred, and he's keen to find out whether Kemi will end up behind bars again.
Kemi Seba's not for the first time facing court charges again for anti-Semitism. The establishment are very keen to put him inside. So he's in today, more charges. He's facing a judge just up here in the Palais de Justice, and just remains to be seen whether he's going to be kept inside.
Throughout the trial, Kemi's loyal band of followers have waited in the lobby. Eventually their leader emerges. He has received a 6-month suspended sentence but remains as defiant as ever.
Et d'autre part, qu'ils sachent que s'ils veulent bâillonner une parole, il faut qu'ils sachent qu'il y a des gens qui sont bien pires que moi dehors.
Et la rue est là, la rue observe. La rue est en train de regarder le 2 poids 2 mesures. C'est ce 2 poids 2 mesures qui, à un moment donné, posera des problèmes à la communauté juive.
S'il y a une guerre mondiale, il risque d'avoir une guerre intérieure aussi dans ce pays parce que on est tous prêts. Si ça tire sur l'Iran ou l'Afghanistan, je peux vous assurer que ça tirera sur les commissariats de police aussi. Ça je vous le dis. Ça je vous le dis.
Pas qu'un seul Kemi Seba, il y a des milliers de Kemi Seba, c'est ça.
Qu'ils le sachent.
À mort Israël! À mort Israël! Bande de chiens!
Kemi Seba has a loyal band of followers in this city, but it's clear that his preaching is not about peace to all men. For the time being, he is a free man with the freedom to spread his particular brand of hatred on the streets of Paris. During his visit, Donald's seen 2 different sides to Paris. The picture postcard city of romance and the troubled and turbulent outskirts.
Ils ont beau faire les choses, mais il n'y a rien du tout qui va changer. Le mal, ça y est, il est déjà installé ici au Bosquet.
Those in the suburbs continue to be vulnerable to those with extreme agendas. It's predicted that the riots will not only continue, but spread into the centre of this great city. Until things change radically, Paris will remain one of the world's toughest towns. Legal trade in sex.
And who's buying sex in Washington?
Politicians. They got money to spend.
Where for many young men, life expectancy is as low as 19.
Might have to worry about people shooting you, robbing you, all that stuff.
Donald's come to Washington, D.C. to find out what makes it one of the world's toughest towns. America, is a compact city of just over 500,000 residents. Despite its modest size, each year as many as 20 million people come to see the sights and check out the most iconic residence in America, the White House. It's an impressive city, of vast avenues and imposing buildings, their very size and stature signifying the scale of America's power.
But there's another side to Washington, a story behind these wonderful monuments and marbled buildings. And it's the story of drugs, murder, and poverty.
Washington is a divided city split between rich and poor, haves and have-nots, and white and black. It has one of the highest crime rates of any American city, with an average of 15 violent murders every month. It's a city plagued by poverty and gang violence, and the gap between different social classes is widening at an alarming rate. Over 50% of Washington's population is African American, and the historic election of Barack Obama, America's first black president, ushers in a new era of change. But Washington is still a city with very real divisions.
What always amazes me is how can Congress and the White House exist and live in a city where things are so screwed up?
In Washington, D.C. in 2007, 1 in 70 people were victims of violent crime, almost 3 times the national average.
Drugs and guns have helped make D.C. the murder capital of the United States.
The huge crime levels are fueled by crack cocaine, a drug that has devastated the poor black communities of Washington since its emergence in the 80s. One of its bitter legacies is a soaring homicide rate. Donald's here to find out how this culture of drugs and violence can operate within a stone's throw of the White House. He's going to ride along with the police units on the front line of the war against drugs, guns, and prostitution. And he's going to meet the ex-gang members who are standing up to the rising crime and preaching a message of peace on the streets.
Today, they would kill you because you just looked at them wrong.
But first, Donald is heading to leafy Georgetown, Washington's most desirable neighbourhood. It's a fashionable quarter of the capital, popular with the well-heeled. Georgetown is less than half a mile away from the White House. But even here, amongst the expensive shops and the cobblestone streets, Washington's violent criminal element is never far away. Donald's arranged to meet Toby Harnden, the US editor of British newspaper The Daily Telegraph. Toby knows only too well how these seemingly peaceful streets can turn nasty. 2 years ago, he had arranged to meet up with a friend of his who had recently moved to Washington.
A friend of mine, Alan Sennett, who was an aspiring politician, who was over here. He was renting a place in Georgetown. He was very excited to be here. We were in email contact, just setting up time to meet and catch up.
Unfortunately, Toby never got a chance to meet his friend. Alan Sennett was brutally murdered on this quiet, leafy back street of Georgetown. It was a murder that sent shock waves across the city. Alan Sennett, a 27-year-old British political campaigner, had lived in Washington for only 3 weeks. In the summer of 2006, Alan was walking his female companion home. Just outside her house, they were approached by 3 men wielding a gun and a knife.
Initially, it looked like it was a robbery, a hold-up. Both of them cooperated, but at that point, it took an even uglier turn.
According to the police reports, the assailant with the gun grabbed the woman and began dragging her down this driveway. It was here that he attempted to rape her.
Alan, you know, he was very brave. He was a hero, really. He couldn't stand there and just watch that happening. So he made a move, and then in the melee, they held him down and they slit his throat, and then he died over there.
Callous.
Absolutely inhuman and pointless and senseless.
Barely 3 hours later, police arrested 4 people in connection with the murder. Among them was a woman and a 15-year-old boy. The gang were known to the police for a string of other violent attacks. They pleaded guilty to murder, and the 2 ringleaders, Christopher Piper and Jeffrey Rice, were given a combined sentence of 89 years in prison. Sennett's murder raised fears that the violent crime endemic in Washington's poorer parts was spreading to the city's more affluent areas. Allen's murder seemed to symbolise the crossing of boundaries between the 2 worlds. To understand the nature and spread of crime in Washington, it becomes clear to Donald that he'll need to cross to the other side and explore Washington's darker corners. Donald MacIntyre's in Washington, D.C., the capital of America. A stately city, home to some of America's most famous landmarks. But look behind this facade, and what is revealed is a much bleaker picture. Washington is a racially divided city. More black men are jailed here every year than graduate from high school. The black majority originally came to Washington on the run from the Deep South. Victims of slavery and prejudice, many believed that in the capital, they could get a piece of the American dream. The reality has been characterized by poverty and violence. Nowhere in America is the inequality between the races more evident than in the capital. Many of Washington's inner city problems stem from the use of illegal narcotics. In the late 80s, a new drug emerged, the side effects of which catapulted Washington to murder capital of the USA. Crack is a cheaper, highly addictive derivative of cocaine. The drug swept across America, pushed by dealers who made huge profits as the addiction set in. Crack devastated many of America's inner city communities.
This city was one crazy city in the 1990s, murder capital in the US. And listen, you know a city's got its problems when the mayor is addicted to crack cocaine.
At the height of the crack epidemic, the problem spread from the streets to City Hall. The mayor at that time was Marion Barry Jr.
But unfortunately, we do have a serious problem of drug-related targeted killings.
But in 1990, Marion Barry hit the headlines when he was caught by the FBI smoking crack cocaine in a hotel room. Footage of the FBI raid was broadcast across the world, causing shockwaves throughout America. Barry was arrested and served 6 months in prison. Amazingly, he was re-elected as Washington's mayor just 4 years later.
Congratulations.
Marion Barry has agreed to meet Donald at a famous Washington landmark, Ben's Chili Bowl Diner. Donald hopes Barry can shed some light on why this city has become such a dangerous place. Although no longer the mayor, Marion Barry is still involved in politics and is a much-loved figure in the Washington black community.
How did your drug problem start?
I don't know. I guess you start, a long time you resist it, and at some point somebody offers you something. You say no, what to do? Find yourself in it. It has no respect of position, of color, of title, of income, of nothing.
And your personal experience really matched, in many ways, tells the story of Washington.
What it does, it gives you a better view of what life is all about on the other side of the street. You got the have and the have-nots, and the situation getting worse. That is, the divide between the have and have-nots in Washington, D.C. is getting worse.
Marion Barry's political career started 40 years ago as an activist in the civil rights movement.
What kind of place was this city in the 60s?
It's changed drastically. You know, back in that time, the divide was much wider. I mean, would you believe as late as 1955 in Washington, D.C., there was segregation. The schools were segregated. It was very, very polarized.
For Washington's black community, the anger they felt about this inequality erupted on the 4th of April 1968, the day Martin Luther King was assassinated. Thousands of people took to the streets of Washington when they heard the news. For 3 days, Washington was subjected to some of the most violent and destructive riots ever witnessed on American soil.
There was rage, black rage, and they showed it through burning things down.
For 3 days, Washington burned. The city was completely devastated. Entire blocks were reduced to rubble.
But it woke up America, I tell you that. America was in tremendous shock. They didn't believe that black people were that fed up.
Washington was nearly destroyed. The city was rebuilt, but now 30 years on, poverty and inequality remain. Conditions which paved the way for the trouble of the 1990s.
And how did this city become the notorious murder capital of the USA?
The crack cocaine epidemic did that. There were murders, people were fighting over turf, fighting over the billions of dollars that were coming in, had captured victims and villains.
There are now half as many murders in Washington than during the height of the crack epidemic. However, the drug is still a scourge in low-income inner-city housing projects, and as Donald's just discovered, it can also reach the highest level of political office. Marion Barry's continued presence on the political scene is an embarrassment for many DC residents. But he is not the only politician in this city to have hit the headlines for a scandal. In Washington, DC, a city of powerful political players, scandal is never far away. Every week, large numbers of lobbyists, fundraisers and politicians all converge on the city eager to do business. And it's no surprise that when a large number of men hit town, many without the company of their wives, another sort of business can flourish. Prostitution is big business here. Girls are trafficked into the city from all over the world to meet the demand for sex. Prostitution is illegal here, but that hasn't stopped sex scandals from rocking the foundations of Capitol Hill, the very seat of American political power. In one spectacular case a few years ago, the whole house of cards came close to tumbling down. In October 2006, Deborah Jean Palfrey was arrested for running one of Washington's biggest prostitution rings. Better known as the DC Madam, Palfrey ran a very successful high-class escort service. When police raided her house, they seized her telephone records, from which a number of high-profile political figures were identified.
I think that there was fear on Capitol Hill and also fear in the top echelons of the executive branch that there were going to be names of people who were Johns of the DC Madam.
Washington was gripped as the DC Madam threatened to sell her client list to pay for her legal defense. One of the first casualties was Randall Tobias, the Deputy Secretary of State. Before he resigned, he ran the Bush administration's program to crack down on prostitution.
Tobias reportedly told ABC he had called on the business for in-condo massages.
The fear on Capitol Hill was, who's next? Who's next?
If convicted, Palfrey faced a jail sentence of up to 55 years for her role in running a multi-million-dollar vice racket. But just before her trial, the DC Madam committed suicide. It was the end of the Palfrey story. but not the end of prostitution in Washington, D.C.
She got busted. There are 30 D.C. madams right now. Probably have clients upstairs in this hotel.
A quick internet search for Washington, D.C. escort services yields hundreds of results. Massage parlours and spas offering in-call and out-call services advertise freely. Most of them are located in downtown Washington, in the heart of the business district. Prostitution is where the legitimate business of DC collides with the illegal world of sex trafficking.
This is downtown DC, and this is where big business meets big politics. This is known as the lobbyist corridor. And the White House is just 3 blocks down there to the right. But in just a couple of hours, the lobbyist corridor becomes the prostitutes' runway.
When the working day ends, the streets in this part of town take on a seedier atmosphere. Inspector Steve Schwarm works for the Prostitution Unit, a specialist department devoted to investigating sex trafficking within DC. Tonight, the unit is planning a raid on a massage parlour in downtown Washington.
That is our target location. And considering we're going to be set up, we're going to try and pull into this bus stop area here so that way we can kind of observe our undercover officer entering the location.
The target for tonight's bust is a Korean massage parlour.
Schwarm is in the area.
The Prostitution Unit have sent in an undercover officer whose job it is to establish if prostitution is happening on the premises.
A lot of these Korean massage parlors are nothing but fronts for prostitution. You know, some of these girls that may work in a Korean massage parlor will be told, oh, you know, I got a cleaning job for you, or I'm gonna be a maid. They come to America, and of course, you know, she's forced into prostitution.
The unit get the call from the undercover officer and enter the building.
Okay, sir, get dressed. Anybody else any more customers to get them dressed?
As they suspected, the massage parlour is a front for an illegal brothel.
Can you speak English, dear? Okay, stay right there. Stay right there.
The girls claim not to understand English, so the police begin to search the property for evidence of prostitution.
Oh, look at this. We got money. It was thrown under a mattress. Eyes open.
The girls that actually work here stay on the premises 24 hours a day. There's cots set up in the back. They sleep here. It's not a fun life. These girls can see anywhere from 20 to 40 customers a day.
Police find a pile of cash and some underwear in the room. But as the client was not caught in the act, he's allowed to go free. But the police arrest one of the girls. She'll be charged with soliciting and prostitution. Often these girls are trafficked into the country illegally and forced into this type of work. For the police to catch the traffickers, they have to hope that some of the girls will be willing to testify against them. But they are terrified of reprisals, and so this seldom happens. The biggest victims, the ones that always lose, are the girls. To get a first-hand account of what it's like to work as a prostitute in this city, Donald's arranged to meet someone who knows all too well what dangers these streets can bring. Donna has been a prostitute in DC for the past 20 years. She will only talk to Donald in the presence of her pimp, Eric. Her experience of walking the streets has given her a unique insight into how this city operates.
Now, in terms of Washington, is sex big business in Washington?
Washington is a sex city. Pussy sells in Washington, without a question. It does.
And who's buying sex in Washington?
Everybody from the common Joe up to the most high. The politicians when they want to get away from the business and take the tie off, without a doubt, they got money to spend.
But Donna is fully aware of the dangers that her lifestyle exposes her to.
I've lost a lot of girlfriends and the lifestyle like that, you know, and their life was taken from getting in cars and never returning. And you would think that would change my way of living, but it's my way of surviving.
These dangers often force prostitutes to work for a pimp. Too often, however, it's the pimps themselves rather than the clients that can pose the biggest threat to the girls.
Some pimps run their things on the fear and on the violence, okay? Some of them actually just run them on that, and they say they care, but they don't really care. I mean, it's just the sort of thing where, you know, look, go get me my money. If you don't have my money, bang, bang.
This is something that Donna has endured herself.
You're not even expecting it. You know, your daddy calls you up and, you know, talk to you, you know, make you feel comfortable and stuff, and then, you know, hit you with, you know, I know that you, I know that you ain't do what you're supposed to do, and then you get some, you know, they call it pimp smack. It's from the backhand. And then after, they'll do that to you. You know, you give oral sex to them, you know, to them, and you fuck them and stuff like that, and then you send you out the street with a busted lip and black eye and stuff. So I know what it's like to be abused.
Clearly, in Washington, big business rubs shoulders with the seedier world of prostitution. There's a lot of money floating around this city, and also a lot of money to be made. And in a city that is as fractured and divided as Washington, it's not hard to find gangs, pimps, or sex traffickers willing to exploit others for personal gain. Coming up, Donald accompanies local law enforcement as they hunt down a gunman.
Anyway, the officers of the FBI are about to pounce.
And discovers how easy it is to buy an AK-47 assault rifle. Washington, D.C. has one of the highest violent crime rates of any city in America. It's also one of America's most divided cities.
The divide between the have and have-nots in Washington, D.C. is getting worse.
While prostitution and politics mix in the high-rise business district, Washington's poorer neighborhoods are plagued with drug-induced violence and drive-by shootings. Every day within the shadow of the White House, police are engaged in a constant battle to curb rising crime and remove guns from the streets. Donald wants to see for himself the challenges in keeping law and order in this city. So he's arranged to ride along with the city police, whose job it is to combat this violence.
Well, if anyone's going to show me the city beyond the monuments, beyond the Lincoln Memorial, then it's these guys. We're going to roll with them. You're going to look after us for the evening, are you?
We're going to try to take care of you.
10-4 with 2 civilian ride-alongs.
Immediately after leaving the station, we enter an area of Washington that feels very different. Donald's driving through a neighborhood called Trinidad. It's a run-down inner-city area of Washington, but the monuments up on Capitol Hill and the White House are only a mile away. Despite the short distance from the White House, it seems like a totally different city.
So what are the neighborhoods that give you the most trouble?
Well, the neighborhood that we're driving through right now is Trinidad, and it typically was one of our busiest neighborhoods in the whole city.
There were times during the summer where it was extremely violent with multiple homicides.
Trinidad has one of the highest crime rates in the city. The neighborhood is afflicted by gun violence. Drive-by shootings plague the area. Earlier in the year, Military-style checkpoints were set up to stop and search all vehicles entering Trinidad in an attempt to curb the crime epidemic. For the residents, it made returning home feel like entering a war zone.
Trinidad should not be treated like Baghdad. We cannot have that here in Washington, D.C.
It was a desperate attempt to curb the murder rate, but the killings continued.
And who's killing who?
It's everybody killing everybody.
And it's kind of ridiculous. You could have a crew of guys that live on this street beefing with a crew of guys that live on this street. They'll go back and forth between the neighborhoods shooting each other.
Gang-related murder in DC is one of the highest in the USA. And like everywhere else in America, it's nearly always related to drugs and the fight to control the market. Donald's riding with the patrol when a call comes in from the dispatcher.
What's that location, ma'am? And who is attempting to execute a search warrant?
FBI.
The FBI had requested assistance to arrest a violent gang member who is wanted in relation to a triple shooting. All units in the area are ordered to meet at a nearby secret location.
And as a measure of how serious they're taking this, the FBI have brought maybe 15, 20 heavily armed guys, and the local police force here have brought 6, now 7 patrol cars with more on the way. There's quite a lot of firepower here for one guy.
Remember, you always want to go there outgunning your opposition. You always want to be in a superior protective posture compared to what they're in, so that's what we're going for.
A call comes through to say the FBI are making their move. The suspect, a notorious gang leader, has been positively identified working in a takeaway pizza joint just a few blocks away. With the suspect's violent history, the police units are here to back up the FBI in case something goes wrong.
Okay, the undercover officer has gone in. He's identified the presence of the man on a warrant. The fugitive is wanted for a triple shooting. Where the officers of the FBI are about to pounce.
You don't draw this much heat unless you're a seriously dangerous individual, and there's a very real chance that the suspect could be armed.
They haven't gone in yet. You can see them all standing, heavily armed.
But the suspect soon realises he is outgunned and surrenders.
They've got the alleged gang member. He's on the floor. He's been taken by surprise. So it's a pretty safe job all round.
The individual's in custody.
Without a single shot fired and their man in custody, this has been a successful raid for the FBI.
So there are a whole bunch of people coming up for a pizza and just confronted with, half a platoon of Glocks and AK-47s and semi-automatics and the FBI, and they just took a guy down who's wanted for a triple shooting, gang-related, earlier this summer, and he's working in a pizza parlor.
Guns are such a big problem in this city that the police have a dedicated gun recovery unit who are tasked with retrieving as many illegal firearms as they can find on the street. It's run by Sergeant Sloan, who has invited us to witness a search of the premises of a suspected drug dealer.
We're searching. We have found what we consider a good quantity of narcotics and a firearm and a large quantity of cash. If you bring your film camera over toward me, I don't know if you need any light. There's a large quantity of cocaine there. There's a handgun right here. from October 30th, 07 to October 30th, 08, just this gun unit recovered 505 guns from the streets of Washington, D.C. So you figure that's more than one a day. So it's with great regularity that we encounter firearms.
It's been a successful night for the gun recovery unit. They have arrested a known drug dealer and taken one more weapon off the streets of DC. Violent gang-related crime is increasing in areas like Trinidad, and the police are locked in a constant fight against it. Donald's witnessed the effects that guns have in poor neighbourhoods and experienced firsthand the fear that is felt on these streets. But on occasion, that fear can spread across the entire city, as in the case of the notorious Washington sniper. In the autumn of 2002, Washington became a city overrun with terror and paranoia. Over a period of 3 weeks, 10 people were murdered in the Washington area, most of them killed by a single bullet from a sniper's rifle. The killings were random and without an obvious motive. A man was shot outside his house while mowing his lawn. Another was killed at a petrol station. A child was shot outside his school. It was clear that anyone was a potential target.
It was true terror in this region for a number of weeks. I remember literally walking across Connecticut Avenue and zigzagging across the street so as not to become a target. At any time of day, anywhere you were, you could get plugged.
Two men were eventually arrested for the killings. John Allen Muhammad, an ex-soldier, and Lee Boyd Malvo, who was just 17 years old.
I think from that perspective, Washingtonians were relieved that it was just two lone gunmen. But there was no kind of resolution of, gee whiz, why did this happen? And to this day, I'm not even sure that I could explain to you, or anyone can explain to you, why these two men were actually just shooting people from their car.
The United States has always held a liberal view on gun possession, but the gun violence in Washington has been so severe that for many years this city had its own unique gun policy. Handguns were outlawed in 1975 and it became illegal to buy one here. In 2007, this law was controversially revoked as it was deemed unconstitutional for Americans not to have the right to bear arms to defend themselves.
I'm about to go to one of the few places in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. where you can actually buy a gun. And that's because until very recently, when the Supreme Court overturned a ruling, simply you couldn't buy or carry a gun within the precincts of Washington, D.C. But that now all is about to change, and I suspect business for the Blue Ridge Arsenal gun shop is about to go up.
This shop sells an astonishing variety of weapons, from small handguns to fully automatic machine guns. Despite the 32-year ban, Washington was still the murder capital of the USA during the 1990s crack epidemic. But now that handguns have been legalised, the worry is that the murder rate will once again rise.
DC is probably one of the most highest crime cities in the nation anyway.
Yeah.
Even with the gun ban.
So it's made no difference?
Yes.
So what could I buy now?
If everything is clean, you can walk out with the gun same day.
Same day?
Yes. It's AK-47. It's a great gun. Well,
I need to get, with a gun like this, 3 forms of ID, is that correct?
3 forms of ID.
Virginia resident, I need to have a clean record, no criminal record, and I need to have the money, and that's it, and then it's mine.
It's shocking. In a city working hard to curb its high rates of violent crime, anyone can walk into a shop like this and walk out with an AK-47. Washington, D.C., America's capital and also one of its most fractured cities. The gap between the rich and poor in Washington is growing wider. And when your options are limited, sometimes criminality seems like the only way out of the ghetto.
It's everybody killing everybody.
In the inner city neighbourhoods, gangs fight to control the markets, drugs, guns and prostitution. According to official figures, there are over 170 gangs in DC, with an estimated 3,000 gang members, many of whom are second or third generation. Older members of the community, some ex-gang members themselves, are trying to help young people get out of the gangs and provide them with alternatives to a life of crime.
This is a group called Ceasefire, which is run to try and keep young men out of gang activity. And it's not run by other young men, it's actually run by the elders of the community, guys who spent a lot of time on the streets and some of them a lot of time in jail. And that's how they garner a bit of respect with the youth. Oh!
Al-Malik Farrakhan, a one-time bank robber and gang leader, started Ceasefire after spending 35 years in jail. He tells Donald that guns were an issue in DC even back when he was running the streets.
Gunplay started with us. It did start with us. It wasn't as readily, but we had many gun battles right out here. We always had gangs, but we wasn't, man, we was pop, 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 getting it up. Occasionally, we get our man, but he had to do something so bad that he deserved to fucking die. Today, they would kill you because you just looked at them wrong.
But it was while Malik was in prison that he decided that something had to change.
Watching the youngins come in, they were lost, man, not coming in the way we came in, as men in the penal system and standing as men, but lost. They was snitching, they was telling, I mean, they were killing one another. So I said, wait a minute, I gotta start something to give them self-esteem back. To teach them, man, that this is Willie Lynch is a move to make you be enemies of one another when he's really not your enemy. He look just like you, he got nothing just like you ain't got. He's oppressed just like you. So this was the birth of Ceasefire. Man, I'd been smacked out the wheelchair, and I had a Uzi stuck in my mouth, but the one that smacked me out the wheelchair became a hell of a Ceasefire member. The one that stuck the Uzi in there became a hell of a Ceasefire member.
Malik has arranged for Donald to meet some of the young gang members he's working with.
These are the young brothers that nobody want to deal with, man. And they're not faking. They ain't just got them little masks on, right? They're not gonna say nothing to incriminate, but they're gonna be truthful with you.
They are taking a big risk congregating in such a public setting, so Donald only has a short time with them. These are the guys who can tell him what it's like to live and die on the tough streets of DC.
Now, what's the best way of making money on the streets?
Hustle.
Hustle. Okay, what are you hustling? Is it girls?
It could be anything.
Anything,
Anything,
man. You can hustle anything.
Drugs.
You can do it.
Anything to get money, you know.
If you want to get an AK-47 or something, would that be difficult?
That's easy, man. We can get that before we can get a job out here. Like, that's nothing. That ain't nothing. You can get that now.
Living by these rules is not a game. The average life expectancy of a gang member in America is just 19.
People just And what was the last funeral you guys went to?
Oh, no, that was last week. Last week, Saturday.
And what happened? Who died?
Oh, one homeboy. Buddy. Yeah, one of our close friends. He got shot.
You must feel that, you know, if one of your mates dies, that it could be you next.
You next. Yeah, like, oh yeah.
Sometimes we think, you know, might not make it a couple more years, you know, 2-3 more years. I might have a feeling like I won't be here. I might be here for a couple more weeks or months. Some people feel that way.
Some people say that DC has improved and it's, you know, it's a different kind of DC, you know, and it's safer for everybody in the streets now. But is that true for you guys?
I guess if it's safer for like tours and all that, like, but where we live at, no, it ain't too safe. If you gotta look around your back every 5 seconds, look at every moving car to make sure nothing ain't happening. No, it ain't too safe.
You might have to worry about people shooting you, robbing you, snitches, all that stuff.
When young guys like these regularly attend funerals for their friends, it brings home how tough life in Washington really is. And when they readily admit that they are doubtful about making it past their teenage years, you have to wonder how much has changed in this city. The fact that the communities most affected by poverty, violence and crime live in the shadow of the nation's monuments to equality, freedom and prosperity is startling. This proximity contributes to the rage and despair Donald has uncovered on the streets of Washington. Barack Obama has moved into the White House, bringing with him the promise of change. Time will only tell whether for the people of Washington, D.C., he can deliver on that promise.